Hey y'all, it's entry number 52 of this off-season series where we discuss a different player's fantasy value each day as a group. We are another day closer to the start of the 2022 NFL season. Each day we'll drop a name, go through some positives and some concerns of their fantasy profile, and then I'll give my personal opinion at the end. Today's discussion will be on Devin Singletary, running back, Buffalo Bills. We'll start with the positives with Devin Singletary's fantasy profile. Fairly efficient runner. Over the course of his NFL career, Devin Singletary has averaged 4.7 yards per carry on 495 rushing attempts according to Pro Football Reference. In addition, he had the fifth most runs of 15 or more yards in 2021, with 14 according to Player Profiler. By being a fairly efficient runner, it gives the Bills more reasons to get Singletary involved in the offense. The other thing I really like about Devin Singletary's fantasy profile for 2022 is his dual threat potential. Devin Singletary carried the ball at least 150 times and caught at least 29 passes in each of his first 3 seasons in the league. During the 2021 season, he posted a stat line of 188 carries, 870 rushing yards, and 7 rushing touchdowns on the ground. And through the air, he had 40 receptions on 50 targets for 228 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown according to Pro Football Reference. Being capable in both of these areas should give Singletary plenty of opportunities to see the field. Moving on to some of the concerns with Devin Singletary's fantasy profile. Added competition. The Buffalo Bills drafted James Cook in the second round of the 2022 NFL Draft. Cook may have not posted the most impressive stats during his college career, but he did show his versatility as both a solid runner and an effective pass catcher. Having new competition may impact Devin Singletary's workload in 2022. The other concern I have with Devin Singletary's fantasy profile is his week-to-week performances in 2021. In .5 PPR formats during the 2021 season, Devin Singletary had 4 out of 17 games with 0 to 5 fantasy points, 6 out of 17 games with 5 to 10 fantasy points, 2 out of 17 games with 10 to 15 fantasy points, 3 out of 17 games with 15 to 20 fantasy points, and 2 out of 17 games with 20 to 25 fantasy points according to fantasy data. On a week-to-week basis, he typically performed as more of a flex caliber play than the RB2 season finish indicates, because he played all 17 games while other players did not. Some additional thoughts on Devin Singletary. The Buffalo Bills will have a new offensive coordinator in 2022, Ken Dorsey, after Brian Daboll left to become the New York Giants head coach. During the 2021 season, Devin Singletary finished as the RB19 in standard, with 157.8 total fantasy points and 9.3 fantasy points per game. The RB20 in half PPR formats, with 177.8 total fantasy points and 10.5 fantasy points per game, and the RB18 in full PPR formats with 197.8 total fantasy points and 11.6 fantasy points per game according to Fantasy Pros. Personal opinion. Devin Singletary is currently going off the board as RB27 about pick 80 overall on ESPN and RB29 about pick 77 overall on Yahoo. I don't dislike him. He should be in the flex mix again this year, but this feels a few spots too high for me looking at some of the running backs going after him. Some examples on ESPN are A.J. Dillon, Kareem Hunt, and Rashad Penny. I think the coordinator change will be beneficial to the Bills running backs, but it's hard to ignore this is looking like a heavy running back by committee backfield once again in 2022 between Devin Singletary, James Cook, Zach Moss, and Duke Johnson. And like I mentioned earlier, there are a few running backs going later that I simply prefer more. Because of this, I probably won't have a ton of shares of Singletary in 2022. For each of these entries, we will highlight a charitable cause or organization that the player is passionate about. I couldn't find a charity that Devin Singletary officially supports, so here's a link to his teammate, Dawson Knox' My Cause My Cleats in 2021, which was for the PUNT Pediatric Cancer Collaborative. Here's a link to that organization below. And that's it for today's entry. If you enjoyed this entry, be sure to like and subscribe.